No, he didn't really. No, he got it. I was like,
Thank you all for coming today. As you all, first, most of you may know, my name is Thomas May. I'm a graduate assistant, and I handle the CEATS program here at VSTOP, which, as I'm sure most of us are aware, is in election administration, technology, and security. So for a little bit of background for those who are not in the program, as you go through this program, you learn through sort of lecture courses that focus on handling election administration, the technology side, the security side, things like that. And at the end, we then go through this capstone project where we take all the information that participants have learned and they incorporate it in a small research project over the course of several weeks. That the purpose of is to sort of improve a problem they see in the elections of their community, or help to improve the elections of their communities, how to utilize the knowledge that they learn and then give back to the community while they do so, which I think is sort of the core of the VSTOP and the CEATS program here. So with that bit of background knowledge, and in fact, I don't want to take up anyone's more presentation time, I believe best to simply now see how it is done straight from the source. So please be sure again to turn off your phones on mute, and if you are on virtual and you're not presenting currently, please mute yourself now. And with that, I welcome Nancy Bryant to the front to give her presentation on poll worker training. Nancy's virtual also.
Hi, thank you. Sorry not to be there, but I'm glad we have this option to do it this way. As Thomas said, my project was on poll worker training. I am the election deputy in Grant County. For a little bit of background on our training, prior to 2020, we used to offer 4 sessions, usually a couple days before the election, like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, or Wednesday and Thursday the week before. We would do one morning and one evening on each of those days. We didn't require reservations, so the poll workers, just usually had their pick of whenever they wanted to come. Typically the first session, the first morning at 10 a.m. was the fullest one we usually had. My office is in the courthouse, and our county building is right across the street, and that's where the county council chambers is located. So we would hold it in the council chambers. The way we did it was we had 3 separate PowerPoints. So it was almost like 3 individual trainings in one. We would cover the inspector responsibilities, then we would cover the judges, and then we would cover the clerks. And the whole training usually lasted approximately 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours. Some of the problems were that the sessions could sometimes be rushed, and that was usually due to probably questions, or different sessions required some of the material to be covered maybe a little more extensively than others, or have more questions. Sometimes it could be lacking maybe detail. And this probably came from being rushed. If we thought we were, having to go over an area that we would have rather have went over in more detail. If we thought we were running out of time, it might have been more rushed. Or we told people, if you want more information, you can stay, and some of you can leave. We did find that doing it like with 3 separate topics, that those who had their topics covered tended to want to leave. So like for inspectors, we'd cover them first, and after they'd be like, can we go? And it's like, well, you should be familiar with your judges and your clerks positions as well, or, getting into the judges. So that was a little distracting and a little, a problem that we thought, well, we want everybody to know be familiar with what everybody's jobs are, because, they all do work together. And then the 4th problem was, since we didn't require reservations, we never knew how many to expect. So of course, the more people tended to be the more questions, and those sessions maybe ran a little longer, or we felt a little more rushed in those. In 2020, and of course, thanks to COVID, with all the social distancing and with the amount of space that our council chambers had, we decided just to have one large session. And we picked one evening during the week. We have the Indiana Wesleyan campus in Marion. They let us use the facility. In the primary, we were in more of a kind of like a auditorium type, like a theater. And then in the general, they had us in a room that just had seats in a rows, and it was a little bit smaller. But we did go to vote centers in fall of 2020. So that we had fewer poll workers in attendance. So the smaller room was all right. In the primary of 2020, some of the problems with that one was because we had approximately 160 poll workers, the check-in process took way longer than we anticipated. Because we wanted them to check in because, you know, they're required to attend training. So to keep track, they checked in, we gave them their materials and then sent them into the room. Well, unfortunately, training started a half hour later than our scheduled time. So many of the attendees were tired, frustrated. They lost patience with some of the discussion and questions. And then also the facility, instead of being right across the street, we were a few miles, couple miles, 2 to 3 miles across town. So as far as making sure that we left here with everything that we needed and, you know, couldn't forget anything, and just the fact of hauling it all down there in our vehicles was a little bit of a challenge. So then in the general of 2020, we continued to have the issues, and some of the, we did go from 160 poll workers to 85, because like I said earlier, we went to vote centers. So that reduced the number of poll workers that we needed. Some of it came down to obviously staffing. We, you know, when we left here to go to training, the absentee board was still here sending ballots, and then the office staff, we were part of the training. So there was only so many of us that could go at one time. So we had, it wasn't quite a half hour, but it was a little bit challenging for the attendees to check in. We did have voting machines and e-poll books on hand because we went to e-poll books with the vote centers. Few attendees took the opportunity to interact with the equipment at the end. And like I said earlier, we used the same facility. We were in a different room, but we were still on the Indiana Wesleyan campus. So looking at the issues with training, and we weren't sure obviously what was going to happen with 20, you know, were we still going to be under COVID restrictions? Were we, you know, how much space were we going to need? But our first number one goal for my project in looking at poll worker training was to improve the overall efficiency rather than rely totally just on our election and voter registration staff, which really just amounted to 2 or 3 of us. And then the clerk, and then sometimes the chief deputy was available to go. Why not recruit volunteers? You know, people who would be attending, recruit volunteers to help us with the check-in process. And then to change the training format, rather from the separate 3 segments that we had, to make it one cohesive training. And the third goal was, or the third part of that, as far as improving efficiency, was to remove any duplicate content. Because when we did 3 separate trainings, some of the things that we mentioned, and either whether it was geared or directed toward the inspectors or toward the judges or toward the clerk, some of it was repetitive. The second goal I wanted was to expand and improve the content. So even though I was concerned about the time issue, I still wanted to try to get, you know, the essential material covered in the training. I wanted to actively incorporate the election day handbook more than we did. I mean, everybody received a copy, but it was more, we would refer to it, but it was more like you know, you need to make sure you read this on your own before election day. And again, remove any duplicate content from the training material. Goal number 3, increasing the value of the training sessions. And I was hoping to do this by eliminating the focus on each job individually, and also to highlight the duties and responsibilities so that all 3, inspector, judge, and clerk, could see how all their responsibilities interacted together. I felt like that would probably engage them more and make it more interesting to them, rather than saying, okay, they covered my responsibility, I'm done, you know, can I go? The 4th goal I wanted was to improve the quality and the quantity of our inspectors' reports. You know, there's so much material that the inspectors go with that they're expected, you know, the forms and the reports they're expected to complete on election day. And I was hoping to be able to improve the quality of the reports. I thought by maybe eliminating some of the duplicate material, it would allow more time to look at the inspectors' specific reports or forms. And then also, since some of those reports require input from either the judges or clerks or their signatures on it, that involving them in the process would make that more meaningful to them. As far as starting with looking at how to change training, obviously it was using my knowledge and staff's knowledge of the resources we have available in our community, like what other venues were available, looking at scheduling and the number of staff available, brainstorming with the other, you know, those of us that were involved in the election process. Again, other ideas for venues, scheduling, whether, you know, how many sessions we could do, and staff, doing some online research, and then reviewing what feedback we had gotten from poll workers from training in the past, whether that was verbal or written. So ultimately, like I said, I wanted to do a training where we could show the election process from start to finish, you know, so that way everybody was engaged. They, you know, come in the door, how their ID's checked, going to the clerk, and being able to look at each position as they flowed together through election day. One of the challenges that I faced obviously was not being able to have done the training to be able to evaluate it for now, because our training sessions are typically the end of April. But in addition to that, just trying to find the balance between keeping sessions at a reasonable amount of time, keeping the attendees engaged and interested, but also being able to thoroughly cover and making them feel confident, you know, the poll workers confident when they left training, that they had everything that they needed. Originally, I felt like I did have to make some compromises, you know, thinking, okay, you know, it may not be feasible to go back to the 4 sessions because of, you know, scheduling of staff. And at the time I was working on the actual training material, we didn't actually have the current 2022 election day handbook, which we just got ours last week. I also would have liked, and I could still do this in the future, to actually maybe visit some other counties and, you know, get some ideas for training to see how they've done it. Evaluation, obviously, unless it was informal and just through conversation, we'd never actually done a survey with our poll workers to evaluate what they thought of training. So I would like to do that. And then obviously when I would get the inspectors' reports and their forms after, you know, at the end of election day, to see if any changes in the training had affected the quality of their reports. Since my project was done, our clerk has reached out to Microvote. We are going to have them for the first time at our training. as a compromise, what we've decided to do, we were going to do one day, but offer a morning and an evening. And with COVID restrictions being lifted, we are going to be able to go back to our council chambers. So at least having, you know, the proximity to the courthouse, and which would be much more convenient. And with still, you know, being vote centers, we will have the only about 85 poll workers. So it's, you know, split between the two. As far as the principles and the tools and resources, we did have some poll worker training materials on the election division's website. As far as content, there was the legislative summary that the election division put out that had a lot of useful information there that pertained to poll workers. Trying to apply the concept that election officials are trusted sources of information should be, you know, able to be applied to poll workers too. Keeping in mind the basics of voter registration, because that obviously affects, you know, clerks when the voters check in. Poll worker requirements that came from one of our CEATS sessions, and then obviously the election day handbook. So hopefully, I mean, obviously it's gonna be too late for class, but I'm anxious to see when we do training later this month, if any of the ideas that I wanted to incorporate and, you know, some changes. Hopefully it makes for a, you know, a better flow for our poll worker training. So I have, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy, for that great presentation. Up next, we have Angela Cornett with improving the absentee process.
Like I said, I'm Angela Cornett, I'm from Clark County, Indiana, far south. We've had some issues since I've been there. I've been there almost 3 years, and the absentee, it depends on who's there that day and how it flows. So they like to move their own way, and that's not going to work because it causes issues. They had ballots going out long in 2020, but we were sending out mass amounts of ballots. Some of the ballots wasn't being initialed by the clerk before going out. And when they come back, we had filing issues as far as getting them back to the right precinct. We have 72 precincts. So there's a lot of precincts, and we have a Union and a Utica, a car and a Chase. So there's the small print is very hard for them to read. So I was looking to get that to be larger and how to help them in that process. So I tried to print out some things that was not having an election, kind of made it harder to do that. So I reached out to Civics, and they're in the process of trying to make the print larger. I've noticed it's not happened yet. So yeah. And after I looked at this, and I realized that my precinct's on there, not on there, but it's usually really small for them to be able to see to file it. We thought about trying to write on the envelope, and they don't like to write one down. That causes more issues because they even do that on the application. The pre-printed ones are the nice ones that they can online, or that they can call the office and they're already printed on there. But they also want to write it at the top, and then they're writing the wrong thing. So we're trying to avoid that and just use the pre-printed ones as what we use, and only write on the ones that we have to write on, that are mailed into us, they print it out on the website, or people send it out at different days. So my goal was to reduce the errors and making the print larger for them. So in turn, I had them come in, and we kind of done a mock printing of the filing, trying to see if they could see it better. So on our bins that we have 74, there's a dark closet in the basement. So I've made the print very large, and that they can clearly see now. on our file system that they use for the applications. They are very large and not in these little plastic holders anymore, so they're very excited since they've been there. They've seen them before, but since they're working with them, I've got a lot of great feedback from it the past couple weeks. And that's where I come with my action plan. Is that where I'm at? Okay. And have a plan wrote out because we have a public coming in now wanting to know what our process is. So it depends on which person they talk to. The process is the same, but it may be a little different. So when the public is like, well, that's not what this person tells me. So I'm trying to get it to where it's, this is how we do it. Everybody's going to do it that way. And that way it can be explained easier to the public and there's not that, you know, well, this is what such and such told me. So I've tried to do that too. That's been very hard. Have their own way. So I have to really hang on them in this process. They're like, well, we've always said this. No, we're not gonna do that. This year, since we've only sent out 50/50. We haven't had any calls of missing signatures or the wrong balance or any of that so far. So that makes me happy. I know that's not very many, but it still is a good start for them to start off with everybody who can offer a year. Writing. And then we have scanners that are provided from ESNS for us to scan the ballot. That wasn't related with absentee, but that was illegally absentee. Given the wrong ballot to the person. They scan it, it prints out, and it prints out the correct ballot that they should get. We just did these use those in 2020 because the mask is too high. Each day. My methods, my plan did not stay the same. I was planning on putting the applications that come back in a file system and then file the ballots. Quickly learned that they have to be attached. So we wasn't able to do that. So we are attaching them in a different way than they have before to make it easier to read, see the signature and compare them. I've thought about trying to print the labels and highlight them, but that didn't seem to make it any easier to read. Highlight mark on there. I talked about the labels that are made for that. So with the CEATS principles, the security of the ballots as well as the CEATS program, how they have to be in, and that's with also the central count team. I didn't realize they had to prepare the signatures. I learned that. So that's why the applications have to be attached and can't be separated, even if they're stored securely. And having the procedure in place so that the public can ask and easily be answered because they come to every county election. And in this process, I would like to thank my absentee board that come in. They came in when they didn't have to help me figure out some issues, give me their ideas. They gave me ideas from 2020 if I put those forward for them, and we're starting to make those go. And so I'm going to allow me that.
Great job, Angela.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christina Crawford and Heather Dollar on moving Tiffin County forward.
Thank you. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Crawford. I'm circuit court clerk in Tiffin County, and this is my election deputy, Heather Dollar. And we are going to be discussing today moving Tiffin County forward into a vote center. So the problem with our county was updating our technology and turning it into a vote center county, excuse me, with the use of electronic poll books. We have an older community, so we were kind of afraid of the change and the technology update.
So one of the things we had to do was explain to everyone, what is a vote center? We still get this question, even though we are just a couple of weeks away from getting this all rolling. And we get this question pretty much daily. But what is a vote center? A vote center offers flexibility and convenience by allowing the voters to cast a ballot at any of their county locations of their choosing on election day.
And with us becoming a vote center, we of course had to have the electronic poll book. And an electronic poll book is an electronic version of the paper poll book. It houses a list of registered voters in the county. And I'm glad to say that we finally got all of ours, and I got them programmed and ready to go for this next election.
And some of our project goals, of course, were to educate citizens of Tipton County about vote centers and electronic poll books. And of course, our main goal was to definitely become a vote center by the primary of 2022, which we have accomplished that goal. In educating the community, we did attend a lot of events. Tipton County is known for their Tipton County Pork Festival, and we went to the Tipton County Pork Festival, and we had a booth set up. I had a large banner made that had every vote center, all 6 locations on there. We only have 6 for a small county. All 6 locations were on that banner. And as of this week, we have now sent out approximately 7,000 to 8,000 postcards to all of the registered voters in Tipton County. One of the decisions we made too, if you decide to do this, one of the decisions we decided to do to keep our postage a little bit less was we would find 5 people might live at 1 resident. So we actually would just address it to the voters at that address. So that significantly decreased our cost, especially with postage and such. So we did that. We do attend community events whenever we're asked. Community events such as chili suppers, morning meetings. Next week will be at 6:45 in the morning with the Kiwanis group. So we would think early apparently. So we will be with that group next week. But anything we can do. One of the other things I've encouraged some of my candidates to do is borrow some of my vote center information. So my big long 7-foot banner has been traveling around. So when they're out campaigning or meeting with schools or nursing homes and things like that, they can take the banner with them, and that helps get the word out. The extra postcards that we had, we pretty much dispersed those out to different places. We've got them throughout the courthouse. I've got people who are going to take them to the American Legion, and just trying to encourage people to take any extra paperwork that we have with them.
So going on with our methods, in the beginning, when we started researching about becoming a vote center, we first applied for the grant for the electronic poll books, because unfortunately without that grant, I don't think we would have been able to have electronic poll books with our county. Once the grant was approved, we moved forward with the steps of becoming a vote center. So our action plan included, we followed closely the steps on the in.gov website. We engaged community interest. Like Kirsty said here, we've attended all those events. We did a study committee. We started drafting our plan. We seeked the public comment. We got our election board approval, and then we went on to file a plan.
So as far as our action plan is concerned, going into a little bit more detail, again, to implement the plan, we started talking to people in the community, just people coming in, talking to different poll workers, people who had helped with the elections in the past. We also spoke to leaders and voters in general, just to get the word out and also get their information, how they felt. Second, we formed a study committee. The study committee contained a group of diverse people from our community. We had everybody from older generation to young. We even had a student here at Ball State who was on our study committee. We asked a commissioner, we asked a councilman, we asked several different leaders, our county attorney, and it made a really good diverse group. Republicans, Democrats, everybody was represented. As she said, we started drafting our plan while opening up public comment for 30 days. So we advertised that we were going to do this, and then we let the public bring in any comments they could ask, they could email, they could come in, any questions for 30 days before we made any moves. After the 30 days, we presented our plan to our election board for approval. Of course, as a circuit court clerk, I sit on that election board, so I just had to also speak to my Republican and my Democrat board, and it was pretty easy sell. Tipton County hasn't had a lot of new changes, so we were needing this, and just some of the dynamics in itself were pretty easy. And then, of course, our final step was filing with the Indiana Election Board. Then going into our principles and tools, phase 1, session 5 of CEATS principles provided us with the most helpful information. This was to get towards our goal. It went into great detail about the electronic poll books and the vote centers, and it explained what they were, as well as giving us some thought about the challenges of the two that we could face. This section contained a lot of points, but some that we took away from it were the pre and post-election savings. We were going to cut our budget basically in about half. We are, again, a very small county. We have 15 places that people would go vote. I know some of you have hundreds, but we had 15. We cut that down to 6. So we do meals for our poll workers, and just the significance and savings for the meals. It's just everything has been cut in half so far. And when we were able to save some of that money, I flipped it over to do things like the postcard program and things like that, and to order the big banner. So the first year we may not show big, huge savings, and we did do a little bit of marketing and such, but in the long run, we're definitely saving a lot more money. Voter satisfaction, that is to be determined because we are not quite there yet. I'm sure when we are through the election, we'll have more feedback on that. But I honestly think that once people are accustomed to it and get used to it, they'll be able to understand how simple this was. One of the things when we get phone calls, I'd like to really encourage people is to understand that if you are in one part of our county, if your grandmother, you're picking up your grandchildren, and they're over here, you don't have to hurry to get back to your polling location any longer. You can vote where your grandkids live. Or in Tipton County, a lot of our residents live in Tipton, but they work in Noblesville, Indianapolis, or Kokomo. So we hit the fine points of making sure we had vote centers located so these folks could hit those coming back into our county. So trying to encourage them why this is a good thing for them as well. Again, the postcards, those just went out. They were very simple. I did not put a lot of details on them. It literally was a postcard that matched my banner that had all of our 6 locations, and in big letters it said, Tipton County is now a vote center county. Where do I vote? And it just listed all of them. It kept it very, very simple. I didn't get into dates, times, anything like that. Security, again, we're hoping that this is going to create a more secure form of the election by just keeping everything contained. We're very, very confident with the way the electronic poll books work, with everything being in the cloud. We feel very safe with that. Then again, the differences of paper poll books and electronic poll books. When I took office 4 years ago, the biggest request I had from our elderly population working the polls was, can we take these books apart? We had those big old books and page after page, and a lot of them would come back, they would be apart. We told them, don't take them apart. They wanted to get 2 or 3 books so they have more space to move the books. So I think that in itself is going to be a real big advantage.
So in conclusion, Tipton County has officially became a vote center county. And like we said, we officially got the electronic poll books and got them all set up. And we are really excited to implement both in the upcoming primary election. By myself, I am excited to get rid of the paper poll books and have one contained so we don't accidentally forget them.
For references, of course, we use the CEATS program here, the fellow people who have been before us, and then of course use the IN.gov. Everybody uses the IN.gov. There's so much information on there, so I highly encourage everyone there. And as part of our thank you, we would like to thank Secretary of State Holly Sullivan and State Election Deputy Jay Phelps for their encouragement along the way. It has been quite a journey, but we are very pleased with the outcome and excited for the Tipton County voters. And I will just say, if you are thinking about becoming a vote center county, reach out to your Secretary of State. She is wonderful with information, as is Jay. They came up to our office. They stayed in perfect contact. We could call them at any time if we needed to. So they were a very big help.
I'm the bad kid who left my notes on my dresser at 5 o'clock this morning before I left to drive up here. So, and I don't like Williams anyway. So we're just gonna play off of this. So what I did for my project is create a voter outreach program and like early education for high school voters, and to try to get younger people interested in getting involved in elections and being poll workers. So the problem I think that we all have is that we have a really aged poll worker pool out there. Back in our 2020 spring conference, the state told us that the average age of a poll worker in Indiana is 72.
And of course, that conference happened right before we were all shut down for COVID. And then we had all of this elderly population who was terrified of getting sick. And I think we all know what that struggle was. So our poll workers are getting really along in years, and our young people are not getting involved. Our voter turnout for young people has been historically very low. And as far as getting them to work the polls is like almost non-existent. We had one high school student volunteer to work the polls in 2020 when all of that came about. And it was actually a high school student from another county, since the state let us intermingle counties during that time. So anyway, those are the problems that really pressed our elections in 2020 and what I decided to work on solving. So what I decided to do about it was to reach out to the high schools. We have 2 in Clay County. So I talked to their government teachers and I arranged days to go in and speak to their classes about elections and poll workers and doing their civic duty, as you might call it. Using the CEATS principles, I created a survey to figure out what students kind of knew about elections in advance. And I called Microvote. Jason Jacobs with Microvote was my predecessor in my county. So I called him and I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And he came and just took a demo machine and programmed like Microvote's demo election on it for me. So that was really great to have him at my beck and call like that. So I got the machine programmed, made this PowerPoint presentation, got on Amazon, bought some stickers, and went back to high school. The glare. All right, so when I went to the high school and gave this presentation, the very first thing I did while they're kind of all filtering into the room was I gave them this 5-question survey, I believe it's 5, and just kind of asked them, like, do you know how to register to vote in Indiana? Do you know where your polling places are? And I got a lot of answers that were like, oh yeah, I do. And then as I talked to the class and said, like, yeah, well, I just Googled it. That's not concrete knowledge, but good for you. So I made this PowerPoint presentation, went through it with them. And then towards the end of the presentation, I had that sample voting machine set up. And so I called them up by rows and let them all come up and interact with the voting machine and taught them how to read their ballot, and that, hey guys, there are instructions here. And, you know, if you over select, it won't let you do that. And let them know that you don't have to fill in every part of the ballot, right? I think that was a thing when I very first voted, was no one had ever told me that it wasn't a test. And I felt like I had to complete it. And I was like, no, these are elections and it's very important, you know, like vote for the people that you really want to vote for. And if that's one person on the whole ballot, like we will still count your one person. And kids honestly had no concept of that. They're so driven to complete the sheet. So after I let them interact with the voting machine, then I brought up the Hoosier Hall Pass program that the Secretary of State has been working on. There's kind of one version of it that exists now, and I guess being revamped is what she told me. So the Hoosier Hall Pass program is what allows 16 and 17-year-old unregistered students, of course, at that age, to get to participate in the election program. And, you know, I told them all about it, and I'm like, you get out of school for a day, we're gonna pay you. So they got really excited. But I told them, I said, you know, the thing is that our poll workers are older, and historically, if you get involved in something at a younger age, then you're going to continue to be involved throughout your life. I'm like, so that's what we want from you. It's like, we want you involved. It's like, we want your muscle for another thing, you know. I would show them all the equipment, had the VV-Pat and everything. And I was like, this stuff is heavy. Like, imagine your little grandma, 75 years old, you know, hauling this stuff around. And these kids were like, oh. So I was like, you know, we really do need you. And I was like, these poll workers love to see young people come work. And I was like, and they'll bring you snacks and you just have a day and hang out. You learn all this stuff and you learn from the older generation. So I really encourage them to take that opportunity and get themselves involved now. And then after I promoted Hoosier Hall Pass and gave them the paperwork for that, then I brought out my stickers. And I told them, I was like, you know, they're all various like patriotic stickers. And I was like, you have to put this somewhere. So every time you see it, I stick in your mind, and you remember to go vote and be involved and work the polls for us. So that was something that I really worked on too, was to be relatable to them. I think a lot of high school kids, especially in a show like this, they feel like you're another talking head at them. And I went to one of them right around Halloween. So I wore like a Hocus Pocus t-shirt, and all the kids are coming around and going, oh, I love your shirt. And then the next high school I did right before Thanksgiving. So I wore a turkey shirt that said gobble till you wobble. And but it's one of those things that the more relatable I was to them and not just, a grown up talking head, they interacted well with me and really moved along. So these are the survey questions that I asked the kids and the results I got as we went along. So you can see I am registered to vote, or I know how to register to vote. I know my voting location or how to find it. I know how or where to vote absentee. Most of them had no concept that early voting existed. They thought it was election day or nothing. If they plan to vote in the next primary and if they're interested in being a poll worker. And so you see my results here. And I mean, a high school class is like 45 or 50 minutes. And in just that amount of time talking to these students, you can see the increase in knowledge and the increase in interest. Whereas I've got 34 who initially were like, yeah, I'm going to vote in the primary. Sure, I should do that. It went up to 62 by the end of the hour because they felt like they knew how to register and they knew how to find their polling place. I talked a lot about IndianaVoters.com and their My Voter Portal access and all the information there and how to look up who's on your ballot before you walk into the polls. So it was just a matter of if they have the information and they know where to access it easily, then it's not so scary. So knowledge and interest just really increased from, one little 45-minute session with these kids. So moving forward, I just have to say that voter education works. You can see that from those results. So the high school teachers were very, very excited about this. They said the kids listen to me 180 days of school a year. So to get somebody else to come in and talk to them about this stuff who's like the expert, they appreciate it. So we're gonna keep doing this presentation. As I think most of you know, I just left the county actually, but I do have all the information in the presentation and I'm gonna teach it to my successor there. And hope that it keeps going because the schools really do love it. So if anybody would like a copy of that PowerPoint, you can reach out to me and use those Hoosier Hall Pass resources available on the Secretary of State's website to print out and get the kids that information. So that's it.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Up next, we have Jennifer Lewis with poll worker preparation.
Vigo County Clerk's Office. We have been doing poll work training for every election. We have poll worker classes, we have multiple classes. Our classes aren't very big. I know we have the last class we had the other day, I think had about 10 people in it. It kind of helps be able to focus more with those people on a one-on-one basis. There is one thing that I did want to implement with our county and changing for our future classes, and that is more of a hands-on training session. Right? I want them to walk into our training facility and have it set up as we have our vote center set up. When they walk in, ideally, I like having our edicts because we had edicts. We now have e-poll books, but have our e-poll book set up so when the poll workers come in, they are able to check in at the e-poll books, and then we give them an ATV. They will go to the judges in the same flow that we have them do in the voting centers. That more hands-on, getting the flow. They get to feel what we will expect from them. They get to see how we expect them to approach the voters when they're coming into the vote centers. And then after we have them run through, we all sit down at a table and we start with our PowerPoint training. We go over certain things that we expect from them. We just every little thing that they think of, we go through training. We cover everything. We cover all the forms, any type of forms that they can come over. I feel that having them go through as a vote center, as we would normally have them, when we're having them sit down and we're talking about the machines and we're telling them how the machines work and what we expect from them, they have already an idea of the flow of how we want them to go. And so with that whole work preparation and having them know what we are expecting from them, when the voters come to the polls to vote, they already have an understanding of how it should be. Not get there on the first day and they're kind of shell shocked and they don't know really what to happen, what's going to go on. They open the doors and you might have a lot of people lined up to vote, but you might not. And if there are a lot and it's really hectic that first day, it's kind of scary for them. So I'd just like to say, imagine you walk into a line, you're in line to walk into a voting center to do your civic responsibility as a member of our country. As another voter walks out, obviously that's front. You continue to walk inside, you find a poll worker turned around from their e-poll book. They're trying to tell the inspector how to do their job. Because a lot of them have been doing this for a long time and they'll say, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what you're supposed to be doing. And that's not right. But things change. We update constantly. And that's kind of disheartening. You walk in and they're not paying attention. You want them to have their focus on you. You want to know that they know what they're doing and they're ready to help you vote. That also lets the voters know that we know what we're doing. Their votes are going to count and the process. Now also imagine if you're in line going to a vote center and you hear another voter on their way out say, I'm so glad they were able to help me. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then next time you walk into the voting center, you walk in, there's your e-poll clerk. They're happy to see you. They're ready to take your ID. Get started. They're not talking to their neighbor. They're not turning around in their seat. They're not walking around. They're ready to go. These little things, keep everything going. It helps instill the confidence that our voters didn't even realize they needed. If later they're talking with someone and they hear something negative about another polling site, they might share their experience and show that they're not all handled the same. Something negative about one polling site, their experience, they can share their experience of this good polling site and say, it's not all the same. And I feel like with the way that we approach how we train the poll workers, it's made a difference and makes them look forward to election day versus being really nervous about election day. But they're not all 20-year veterans. We've got some new ones. We're trying to get more younger ones involved. But that comes out of the chair. I liked your thoughts about the school and things like that. With the training we've taken in the past, we've had inspectors who've allowed themselves to get really overwhelmed to the point where if it's an early vote center, they're not even sure if they want to come back the next day. And so this year we have implemented bringing in an accordion file. And so with that accordion file, we have put all the forms that they need in there. Any that they might need. We've got all of them in there. They're labeled. They can find them easily. Also throughout the training, we kind of give them like a mock voting. And we let them be the poll workers so they can get the hands-on training that they need and get a feel for how long it'll really take for us to, how long it'll take maybe a voter to get through the line. Give them a problem like if somebody needs to do an absentee ballot or somebody had an absentee ballot issue to them. What are the poll workers going to do with that situation when that voter comes in? Things like that. That means, when they have that situation arrive at the voting center, they are not stressing. They're not going to forget lines. Also with that, in that accordion file, we keep samples of all the forms that they'll have. And so with those samples, they are highlighted. Some of them are partially filled out just so they can have an idea of what to put in there. That is very helpful. that alleviates a lot of guesswork because we don't need them guessing. We also have multiple trainings. We have a training set up that everybody will come to, and then we'll have a second training for the inspectors and judges to come to. They can get a little bit more detailed talk training with the forms and things that the co-workers, like the poll clerks and the initial clerks, they're not really needing to know that. The exit clerk doesn't need to know all the forms necessarily that the inspector is going to be filling out. You know, it keeps from having too many cooks in the kitchen. You start getting too many comments here and there, and it's just confusing. We just don't need that. We have certain ways that we handle everything. We expect certain things done a certain way. So with having all that hands-on training, you know, first-time voters now officially feel like what it's like a vote. My first time with training a couple years ago in 2020 was my first election work. And so coming into that with not knowing the process, and the way that we did training was we kind of split our groups up into threes. We had somebody at the poll clerk check-in. We had some people at the voting machines, and then we'd have people at our OBOs, and then we kind of rotate them around. And it's kind of confusing when you start at an OBO and then you go to your equal. So I like the thought that the process of having them all start and go through the flow, it just makes a difference. You start to notice when it's their turn to be the poll workers and help us, you see that aha moment where they're like, okay, this is making sense. And they've got an idea of the flow of how everything is, you know, going to be. We like to keep the PowerPoint presentation to the point. Don't overwhelm them with a lot of information that they don't really need to know. But then, you know, with the inspectors and judges, their jobs are a little more important. They get paid a little more, so that extra training is needed. We make sure that, you know, everyone has keys to everything they need. We try to just let them help them out as much as they can. So when it comes to election day, they don't have to stress. We have arrows on the ground where we want the voters to go, just to try to keep the flow going, and to help them out. I feel like our poll workers do a really good job, but just that little bit of extra, the hands-on, letting them do a mock during training, a mock election, just that makes such a difference for them, and just the way that certain people learn. Some people want to do the hands-on, and others just like to sit down and watch, which is fine, but they really need to interact with the machine. They need to see each other interacting with the machine. And I feel like any counties that really, it doesn't matter what type of voting equipment you have, but when you're training, have them walk through, have them go through like you would expect them. Like, because unless you're going to have deputy clerks or somebody from your clerk's office at each of your voting sites, you're not going to be able to really watch the flow and watch how it's going. You just got to kind of rely on that. Training went really well. Really, my conclusions are that, you know, the mock voting center for the poll worker training is essential, and it does work. Give them issues that you know your county faces a lot of. If you have a lot of people that might need provisional ballots or something like that, really harp on that training, especially things like that. You have to fill out these complete forms. We've gotten forms back that are not completed, and that's just it's discouraging for, you know, everybody. And we want our poll workers to be happy. We want the voters to be happy, and with poll worker training, it kind of ensures that they can share the security. They can share what they know with friends and people in town. You know, this is really good. They can tell the people how to do it, try to get people to come get involved. And I think that's really important too. They need to get involved and see the flow for themselves. So.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that presentation. We're going to be moving to a brief intermission, so we're going to come back here at 12:20. Finish the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, yeah, she said that they're gonna leave that there until like 2 o'clock. Oh my goodness. We're only 10 minutes,
Yeah, we're going to end at about 1 o'clock, which is fine.
honestly, that's not good. So
Oh, that's right. Okay.
we kind of
So
saved 10
we're,
minutes.
yes, we're on time.
Technically, I think we'll be all right. I want to see, but I want some pictures. Maybe I gotta go outside. The pictures are just hanging out here.
Oh. So special. They don't want
Oh.
I stop people, I try to get your phone number because I take a picture. Jeez,
Well, you are supposed to be, you're the only clerk.
I know. I realized
Clerk wanted to do it, but she didn't sign up. There's no print on the name.
I was like, like she's giving us her support. She's a partner up here. She really likes this.
Plus, the cake is beautiful, and if you want to take a photo before I cut it.
Oh, I'm not always do that.
I know. I know, that's. But you're done with that. See, that's what happens. My coats are. I think. A little bit.
We came up last night, we're in Gave us a little relaxed time. We got to get to town last night. Yeah. She came from. I heard her say she loved her pop pop. I've got stickers. Oh, you want to put these on there? I'll put these stickers. I'll take one, thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It is Dr. Byers' recipe.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Oh, what's wrong? You have another one.
Oh.
You're welcome.
Like a lemon lime soda. Those ones are really good. Like, I have those earlier stuff. Oh. I wish I would have known we had these earlier. Thank you so much. Yeah. Get the polls, the same things, the same time.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, she lucked out, didn't she? Those online, yeah.
Oh, no, I think the other online one was. Before the capstone. They wait for the ribbon cutting before the graduation. But to me, yeah, to me. Leave before everyone gets into it. I just think that's really. At least some of the work, I mean, I get it, Secretary of State, you know, I'm sure she's got a day full of stuff to do. What is that mean? What is that?
You're right.
I know. But the only thing the pro is that for schools is the people that are still waiting to see their kids will have a better look at their kids, so. That's. We're
Getting it.
Yeah.
Where you get it?
I always.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Right.
I screw, I brought your cartridge down a little bit. Yeah, this is my, you're going. Jesus.
Yeah.
Kept me through this.
Well, then not.
Sitting in the hotel room. It's just funny trying to get it into, get them to do it. And I'm like, no, we didn't know, you know. It's just the whole world. And it's not really, it's not that much different. They just have their ways that this other set be changing.
I think about my eyes are closed or I'm making weird faces. Pictures. I'm laughing. I don't know I'm laughing about with my eyes closed. I'm whistling. I'm smoking. I'm
Trying to get your face when you're facing this way.
You, Heather. You must have been bad.
Oh gosh, I look like my brother on the side.
I should have over there. But the other
My eyes
side.
are closed. And there you are.
Go back up there and stand.
Paris.
Go back up there and stand. We'll take
Go
a
upstairs.
picture.
You really gotta go. Oh my gosh.
I can't do that. Okay.
You need another one? There you go.
Yeah, act like
There you go.
act like, are you taking it yet?
Yeah. I'm doing what you did. Take lunch.
You just said that.
Let's see. That's the best one. No, you're rolling your eyes. No, it's this one.
That is a perfect representation.
That is us every day.
Roll your eyes.
My eyes are closed again. What is that? Oh my gosh, I'm terrified.
There we go.
There, that's a habit. This is just like working with me every single day.
She's like this.
So far, yeah. I do like that.
I just love that there's cake. There has cake at a graduation and they brought cake.
I just take cake around. I'm at the state now. Yeah, we're gonna go next Thursday. We found out her we get cake. I like the view. Heather, I'm trying to send me your picture.
I'll get them tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
My phone's so slow.
Oh.
I know.
I think I'm just gonna let Haley, so she's on the outside.
What I say, what I mean. Like we can frame it.
I'm gonna frame a picture. And put it right on my desk so I work officially every day.
Rat.
He's just taking a picture.
How's your presentation? Where'd you have the big bag for the certificate?
Yeah, that's.
I never, I couldn't send to me, there was.
Oh,
She didn't even get to teach. My son's old girlfriend that was beat up. She worried about getting a call and.
Yeah.
Think about that.
You know, like ours on like,
Don't think it's
skin and stuff inside.
Are you gonna bite me? No, I forgot. Raccoons and blame like that. That's not right. I don't want to bite my own. Oh, you don't want to raccoon, but I thought you were gonna bite me. Now you're gonna get my email address. You cannot take me any shoes. I'm gonna apologize in advance for her shoes.
I just sat down with you, Bob.
You just let me know when you're ready.
I'm worried about getting it home without getting, salt on.
Okay, I'm ready. C. Crawford, C-R-A-W, F-O-R-D.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'll welcome
Thank you
Tashua
so much.
to the stage to talk about creating an incident response plan.
My name is Tasha Emanuel, and I work with the Allen County Election Board. We have 278 precincts, just over 267,000 voters, and 114 voting locations. Our former director, Beth DeLove, had a desire to create an incident response plan for a really long time, but it was one of those things that always got put on our back burner. Who has time to do this? So when it came time for me to take this class, and she knew I had a capstone project, she said, "Oh, I got just the idea for you." So that's what leads me to creating an incident response plan. So think back to the last time that you experienced an undesirable or unexpected event. If you've been on Earth long enough, you know it's not really a possibility, but it's more of a probability that these things are going to happen. So it's just one of those things called life, right? However, far too often we hear how important it is to have a plan. You got to have a plan. It's going to help reduce chaos. It's going to let the people in charge be confident in the fact that they're going to be able to resolve the issue and go back to normal business. So what I want to share with you today is how we took the probability of undesirable events and created a plan for each event. Everyone involved in election administration understands that our jobs are different. We don't have the luxury of just going through evacuation processes and explaining to our employees, this is what you do in case of a fire, right? We have all these different moving wheels. We have so many places and so many people that we have to look out for. Recent experiences. The list here is just a couple reminders of things that have happened to us. You may not have experienced any of these things, but I know everybody experienced the bottom one, right? When the pandemic started, we had no idea what all was going to happen, right? We didn't know what to do. But now that we've experienced it, we've created a plan, and we know that moving forward, we have confidence that we can make it through something like that. So my goals for the project were to create an easy to follow step-by-step list for each person in our office. So I had to create a response team. And inside that response team, each person had their own responsibilities. I knew that creating this would kind of give that flow and efficiency in resuming to normal business. So let me jump into the how, because a lot of times you hear how important it is and that you really need to do it, but how do you do it, right? What do you do? Where do you even start? So the first thing that I did was I created an outline. I made a list of all of the events that I thought that could happen in our area and that needed a plan. Things that I included in my plan were fire, tornado, power outages, because again, that's happened to us, and cyber attacks, because we hear a lot about that in our line of work as well. Always putting the safety of our workers first and our voters. I had to figure out what steps I needed to take to make sure everybody was safe. So that was the next thing I had to focus on. Along with all of those different wheels that I'm talking about that go along with our jobs, I also had to remember we had to follow state statutes, right? We have to make sure that we're transparent to the public because we're dealing with their election. And then also to have that integrity in the election process. during an undesirable event. I was able to do this by determining which sources I was going to use. On the methods, I have research. I cannot tell you how many piles I have and folders, electronic documents, physical documents. Just so there's so much information out there. It's overwhelming. It was like, what do I use? What do I don't use? So one of the things that I focused on was our local Homeland Security. They have an office. I really leaned in on them and different things that they had to put in place. Our building and maintenance department, I really worked closely with them to find out different evacuation processes and things like that, along with federal government websites like ready.gov. OSHA has a really great website. When I started working on the cybersecurity stuff, the Belfar Center had a great information about cybersecurity. And then of course, the Indiana election code book, everybody loves researching that. So to be honest, it was a very hard project because we experienced the snowball effect. One topic led to another. Oh, well, do you think we should do this? Oh, and then who's going to do that? It just really snowballed into this big, huge thing. So it was really hard to really focus and narrow down not only the topics that we were going to use, but who was going to do which task in the event. My best advice for somebody who would be wanting to start a project like this is think about the events that may happen in your area. Like, obviously, we're in Indiana, you don't have to worry too much about hurricanes, right? So think about focusing on things that might actually happen in your community. That would be my best advice. And then create that team that's going to be your response team and make sure that they understand their responsibilities within each event. We did tabletop exercises for every single event in our IRP, and it's very big. So it was really, really nice. In conclusion, I did create the book. We made a binder. Each person has their own binder for their IRP with their specific tasks. It was extremely time consuming. I am so glad that it was an off election year for us because it took a lot of time to go through all of that research and things like that. It was a huge need for overall election process. And I just started with the election board late March of 2020. So I know a lot of people are kind of newer too, but it's hard when you really don't know what all goes into everything that we do, right? So I really had, and I really got to give a lot of credit to my team because they filled in all those blanks for me that I didn't know. Well, why do we do that? Well, what happens next? And things like that. So having a really good team was a big deal. And then also another token of importance is the dedication to the IRP. You hear all the time how important it is. And now that we've created it, it's great, but we're going to have to maintain that. Everybody knows throughout time, processes and people change. So somebody's going to have to keep that book up to date. So that's the other thing. It takes a lot of dedication to keep that information up to date. The CEATS really helped me in this class because coming in new, there was a lot of things I didn't know. So we had some really great classes that taught about election integrity, overall knowledge of the voting systems, including the machines and the poll books. Also, we focused a lot on cybersecurity and physical security, which is so important in our line of work. Then references, I listed some of the places that I did get a lot of my research from. Again, I have to thank my team because they really filled in a lot of blanks for me on things that I didn't know. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to take the class because it really did help in preparing this long awaited project that Beth had for me.
Thank you, Joshua. Up next, we have Lisa Meir and Jessica Whitehead on Delaware County Vote Centers.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lisa Meir, and I'm the voter registration clerk for Delaware County.
I'm Jessica Whitehead. I'm the election clerk and file clerk for Delaware County. And we did our project on vote centers, and we, Lisa and I both agreed that vote centers would be beneficial for Delaware County, both for the voter and the budget. We worked together to educate the community on the benefits of vote centers, or on the benefits that the vote centers would create for Delaware County. By holding public forums, and we went into the neighborhood association meetings and talked with the voters and did what we could to address the concerns of the voters. Along with that, we worked with our public officials and our local party leaders and the county election board to implement a vote center plan. And we've also worked on addressing and tackling the issues that have hindered the progression toward vote centers in Delaware County, because we've had a history of our party leaders not working together toward bringing vote centers toward Delaware County. So our goals for this project were to educate the public, accessibility for all voters, savings for the county, getting the polling sites out of our schools, because security for our children is a #1 priority. Political parties setting aside their differences, and then improving the overall voting experience.
As Jessica said, some of the stuff that we did to educate the public was we formed a study committee, and I am so grateful for them. And as Tipton said, it was very bipartisan. We had young, we had old, we had a county commissioner on there, former state rep, the head of the NYR. We wanted to keep politics out of it and just get a group of people, and they volunteered their, they weren't going through this class. So we were so very appreciative to them of meeting with us, and I feel they were a part of this with us. We held public forums. The public forums were not as well attended. We found it was better to go out and interact in the public, to go to the neighborhood association meeting and get feedback. And, starting out on this and starting this class, I didn't know a lot about vote centers either. And the more research I did, the more I got very passionate about vote centers. And I found going out to the neighborhood associations and just talking with people in the community, they didn't know what a vote center was. They didn't know how vote centers worked. A lot of what we heard was voter suppression. And what we've learned and what I've studied is the exact opposite. It's more accessibility, it's more opportunity. It's getting across. And as she said, in Delaware County, this has been something that our current clerk
our past clerk and our clerk before that has tried to implement, and it's come down to the two political party chairmen. And I think making them understand that this is not going to cost them votes. This is going to encourage the voters. It's going to give more accessibility to the voters is one of our big struggles. So some of our reasons for wanting to do this is to give accessibility to the voters to vote anywhere. I'm gonna use my husband here as an example. We live here in Delaware County. He's working in Carmel right now. Sometimes he don't get home till after 6 o'clock. But how great is that if he can swing by Delville off 69 and vote and not have to make it home? I think Tipton was talking about that as people are coming into the county. Also, we want to make sure, because some of our polling locations right now are not on public transit. And that was one of the things that we put in our plan, that every vote center that was located within the city was on public transit. Of course, making sure it was ADA compliant and plenty of parking, easy access, and of course the secure network. So Jess, you want me to take this since I have the numbers here, or do you want to do this one?
You can go ahead since you have the numbers.
All right. We wanted to look at cost, saving money. And one of the things is Delaware County is already full vote county. So we do not have that startup expense. And currently we spend $47,731 on election poll workers. We have 49 polling sites we use now. Mine and Jess's vote center plan calls for 24 vote centers with 2 satellite offices, which would be open 2 weeks prior to the election, including a Saturday. Staffing those facilities would cost $27,600, saving the county $20,131. We also pay $150 per site for those locations that are not a government that we can't use for free. So we're going to cut that cost. We're also going to have the less costs for the teams that deliver the machines to the facility, because we will be cutting it in half. So, and we've also thought, what a great amount that we can put back in to better the election in other ways. So yes, we are saving money, but we could also utilize that, paying our poll workers more, just different things.
So again, we, as we mentioned before, one of our goals is to secure our schools by pulling out as many of many sites as we can to secure our schools for the safety of our students, the faculty, and the voters. And then also, working with our party leaders to set aside their political differences for the betterment of our voters. And then our final goal is to improve the overall voting experience by having vote centers in high traffic areas, by utilizing our vote machines at each site, and then by encouraging the vote. And then Lisa, do you want me to take this one also?
Sure.
So this was a chart here that we used for our vote center survey. We had a vote center survey that we used, and one of our questions was if we had vote centers in Delaware County, would you be in favor of it, or would you utilize that? Or I think it was, would you be in favor of vote centers in Delaware County? And as you can see here, 80% is in favor and then 20% was against it. So the public is obviously in favor of vote centers in Delaware County.
And this is just looking at a graph we did of the savings by, it cuts it in half, the savings for going to vote centers. And this is where our project is now. We didn't get it implemented. We still do not have the agreement of the election board to go to vote centers. But we've got the word out there and people are talking about it. The public's talking about it, our officials are talking about it. Our newspapers, there was a gentleman here earlier, Jay Pennicup, he is the political writer for the Star Press here in Delaware County. He ran 2 articles and he just told me, I want to interview you next week again and see what the holdup is. He's going to also talk to our county clerk, Rick Spangler, and we're getting the word out there. And eventually we're going to get this. And because we're not going to give up. We're going to see vote centers in Delaware County. And these are the people we would like to thank. The first ones here are our vote center study. Sherry Riggin, Mike White, Jason Donetti, and Josh Chalby, they were on our study committee. Our GSI director, Kyle Johnson, actually set up our survey for us and put it on our county website and social media. And then my clerk, Rick Spangler, and our chief deputy clerk, Jan Jessup. And then Valerie and Matt from the Indian Election Division, I feel like they become my best friends because I was on the phone with them continuously and they are so helpful. And then, of course, the entire VStop staff for helping us. And thank you.
Thank you to both. Up next, we have Elizabeth Hughes. Oh wait, no, voter education. Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Vigo County. And Haley here is going to pass out some material for you. I wanted to focus on voter education because it is an ongoing struggle that we face. You have voters, for those of you who have not yet gone to vote center, forewarning, 10 years later, you're still going to get phone calls wanting to know where they have to go vote, and they're going to still be confused about the fact that they can now go to any of them. You put it in the newspaper, you get on radio, you get on TV, you do your best to get that information out there, but it's an ongoing process. So I find voter education is very important. One of the things that I really like about trying to get the message out is using social media. We, in the past, have used social media very heavily. But there are good points to that and there are bad points to that. So with social media, the good points that you have there, it's an easy way to get information to the public. And it is a great way to reach younger voters, and it's cost effective. You don't have to print it. Now there are options on there where you can run ads, and we have done that and some great results with that as well, but it's not necessary, especially when you're staying local. Now we get to the bad part of social media. It requires constant monitoring. During the 2020 election, those that were on the PR team, Haley, that is with us today. Nights, weekends, you're getting comments, you're getting mail, and we had to monitor that because at that time, what we
doing if somebody put a comment on our Facebook page. Our clerk was on the ballot. So when politics get involved, sometimes you have people that were directly attacking the clerk. We're not gonna allow that, so we would delete the comment. Or if you have people that are putting out false information, we would delete the content. That's the constant monitoring. The Facebook page can be hacked. And then this is what I want to get to, is that it can lead to litigation. Our health department in Vigo County actually is under litigation right now because of COVID issues. Somebody posted something, they deleted the comment, now that person is suing over freedom of speech. And my first thought to that was, well, no, it's ours. We own that, we can delete our content if we want. Well, it turns out when you're a government entity, that is not always the case, that we are required to allow people to have free speech. Now, this is something that I'm still working on, I'm still studying it. So we as supervisors sat down and said, what do we do? Because we don't want to get sued over our Facebook page, but we want to continue to use it. So we have opted now at this point where we use it for informational only. Our Facebook page is no longer interactive, which makes me sad because I feel like we're losing half of what its ability is. But it puts us in a safe place. So there's not a way to turn off comments on Facebook, but there is an option where the only people allowed to comment on the post is if you have tagged them in it. So as long as we don't tag anybody, nobody can comment on our posts. And it's still a great way then to get the information out there. What are our voting locations? What are our hours? And all of that, it's still going out. We're just not receiving any feedback. And that's okay. And maybe that will change in the future once we see what does happen. In fact, the health department ended up having, they don't even have a Facebook page anymore. And I didn't want that for us because I still wanted to be able to use it. And that's something that we will continue to monitor. The other thing that we did was we created these handouts. Our Chief Deputy Leanna Moore and our clerk had gone to South Carolina. And South Carolina has brochures that are similar to this, and she brought them back. And I said, I love that. We need to do that. And I have on the slides, it goes to everyone. I have handed these out so you can read them, take them with you. I would recommend if you decide to do something like this in your county, this was a lesson learned after I had printed them. You want to put your heading and your difference on the top of the brochure, not on the bottom, because a lot of brochure stands go this way. So now when these are going to stand, it all looks like it's the same brochure. So we are looking for ones where they'll be like this. But that's, when you're creating something new, you don't want something like that. So we have these in the clerk's office. We have them in the absentee voter office. They're going to be in our vote centers. Which one of them is in the mall. Yeah, grocery stores, anywhere that will let us put these, they're going to be there. So I did do 3 of them. One on registering to vote. So this one, the entire brochure is just on information on how to register to vote. You can register to vote online, and it tells you how to do it. You can register to vote in person, and it tells you how to do it. Register to vote by mail. And who has the right in Indiana to vote? We have that information as well. Then on the back of each one, so the one that's about voter registration, I put the number for the voter registration office. We have one on absentee voting with the absentee voters office, and then we have one that's just voting in Vigo County with the Vigo County clerk's information on it. It's got our website, it's got our social media, and just a lot of information. This was one of my favorite ones, was how to vote by absentee by mail, because this became huge. Everybody wanted to know that it always voted in person
now they're not comfortable and they don't want to leave. How do I do that? So we developed a step-by-step guide for them to know exactly step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how you do it. And then our voting in Vigo County, that is just kind of sums up a little bit of all of the information on what you need to know. And it even goes into the cycle, you know, where you've got your first year with your midterm elections, then your city and small town presidential election, and then in the 4th year, there's no election except in special circumstances. A lot of people, they don't know that. I've had people that are my friends and know what I do. And that makes me feel like, man, I'm not doing my job well. But it's just the way that people are. But I would encourage, you know, to think about something like this for your county. We've seen good results with them, and I can think that we will continue to do so. And we are going to continue to look for more ways to educate our voters about everything involved in voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for your incredible presentation. So that concludes the presentation portion of today's graduation event. Congratulations again to each of you for all the hard work that you've put in this year. Like another round of applause for everyone. We will now turn once more to the VSTOP program co-directors for concluding remarks.
Well, thank you, Thomas and Liz, for great job on getting this set of presentations. And we were back there at Brian and I listening to all, and we find that each year the quality keeps on improving. And this was a great batch. So our such great work. When we started this back in 2018, Brian, we worked with each participant in getting the presentation, and we've been doing that. So we are so happy to see newer topics that are coming in and topics that are relevant to what we do, what you do in your counties on an everyday basis for helping out voters and the election administration process. So in all, and we have recordings of this, right? So this is for our record books that our quality of these keeps on going, and we are looking forward to the next cohort. And you all, now that you graduated, become our alums, our alumni. And we will call upon you for help because you are now the experts having done this. So when we have new participants, we'll be asking, and we've done that with the past cohorts, and they have helped out. So you are joining the ranks of our alumni, and we'll call upon you for help as and when needed. And we hope that you'll stay in touch. Thank you. Thanks again.
I echo everything Dr. Baga has said. We're just delighted that you accomplished this goal. We couldn't be happier for you today. We're so happy you're here, and we're able to get your presentation, your name, and your presentation title will be on our website for posterity. So it's there. So people will be able to see what you presented on. So, I mean, it's possible that you may get contacted by someone who may be interested in learning more about what you did from a county, maybe from another state. Hard to say. So, but we would just want to forewarn you. That's what we've been doing for the last 2 cohorts. You're, of course, the 3rd cohort. Every cohort is special in its own way. And it's, as I mentioned earlier in my remarks with Dr. Baga this morning, we're educators. So this is really central to what we are as individuals, as professionals. So it's a very special part of the VSTOP program. And you all make it all more special. So thank you.
if I may add, if there are others in your counties working in the election administration area or in other counties that you talk to or keep in touch with, encourage them to join this program. And you could, you are our ambassadors now,
Yes.
as we said, as alumni. You could tell them the good things that we do and the good things that come out of this as products of what you presented. So we always are happy to have our alumni help out with the enrollments to the new cohort that's starting. We have what, 8 or 9 already enrolled?
Yep, 8.
And we are looking to enroll more. So we'd like to go up to 15 if possible, or maybe even beyond that.
And we have scholarships again.
And we have scholarships.
So that's another thing that you might mention if you are happy to talk to someone you might be interested in. Colleges.
7 scholarships remaining.
Seven scholarships remaining, right?
Thanks again, and grab some more snack on your way out. And have a safe trip back.
Well, we have cake.
Oh, we have the cake
Oh,
too.
we have cake.
We have a cake for you.
So don't leave
Just for you.
without-
Yeah. Don't worry, we're not gonna say anything. But please, stay with us and enjoy the refreshments. Awesome.